Welcome to Rub's story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe before listening to the story in the content. It started with an inheritance, unexpected and undesired. Lydia Raines, a 20-year-old hospice nurse worn thin by grief and exhaustion, received news that her estranged grandmother had died and left her the family house in the rural town of Merrow's End. The home, sitting alone atop Mercer Hill, was where Lydia's mother had vanished decades ago without explanation. Against her instincts, Lydia drove 5 hours out of the city, seeking answers or, at the very least, closure. From the moment she stepped through the heavy oak door, the air inside felt wrong. It was thick, stale, like breath held far too long. Dust coated everything, but nothing seemed disturbed, as if time had stopped. The attic door, oddly, was slightly ajar. Lydia stared up at it, heart thumping without reason. A cold draft whispered past her shoulder, and in the silence she could have sworn she heard something upstairs move. She shook it off. Grief makes ghosts, she reminded herself. She didn't believe in that kind of thing. That night, she dreamed of her mother standing at the foot of her childhood bed, mouth sewn shut, pointing toward the attic. When Lydia jolted awake in a cold sweat, her phone displayed 3:13 a.m. The attic door was wide open. Lydia began cleaning the house during daylight hours, avoiding the attic altogether. But one object kept drawing her attention: a large antique mirror in the upstairs hallway. Unlike everything else, it was spotless. Not a speck of dust marred the glass. It seemed to hum faintly when she passed it, like a quiet breath beneath the surface. That night, Lydia passed the mirror again and froze. Her reflection wasn't matching her movement. While she stood still, her reflection tilted its head slowly, unnaturally. She stumbled back, but when she blinked, the mirror was normal again. She told herself she was overtired, but when she turned to walk away, a single breath fogged up the mirror's surface, though Lydia hadn't exhaled. In the reflection, written in the fog, was a single word: help. Determined to reclaim her sanity, Lydia decided to explore the attic. Dust and cobwebs greeted her like old ghosts, and tucked in the far corner, beneath a Mathetan tarp, she found a heavy trunk secured with an iron lock. There was no key in sight. That night, scratching sounds echoed from above her bedroom. It wasn't rats, it was deliberate, dragging, clawing. She grabbed a flashlight and climbed the stairs. The trunk had moved. And the lock gone. Slowly, she lifted the lid. Inside was a tattered white nightgown stained with dark rust. Folded neatly on top was a photograph of her mother as a young woman standing in the same attic, with eyes that looked utterly terrified. Lydia began hearing whispers at night, not from the attic this time, but from beneath the floorboards in her bedroom. It was always the same voice, low and sorrowful, repeating a single phrase over and over: "She's still here." Driven by dread and curiosity, Lydia pulled up the loose floorboards one afternoon. Beneath them, she found a crawl-space hand inside, a child's rocking horse, and dozens of yellowed, handwritten letters addressed to her grandmother. Most were unreadable, scratched out in angry ink, but one stood out: she promised to stay dead. The last line of the final letter chilled Lydia to her core: "You can bury a body, God, you can't bury a soul." One night, following a trail of cold air, Lydia discovered a hidden door behind the old linen closet. It opened into a narrow hallway leading to a room bathed in a dim red light. Inside, symbols were scrawled onto the walls in what looked like dried blood. The smell was coppery, old, ancient. In the center of the room was a chair, and on it, a tattered diary. The final pages were filled with frantic scribbles. "The girl won't stay down. She keeps calling from the attic." Lydia realized the handwriting matched her grandmother's. As she left the room, the door slammed shut on its own. The light flickered, and in the mirror opposite the chair, she saw her mother, again screaming silently, hands pressed to the glass. Lydia began losing time. Hours vanished from her day. She would find herself standing in unfamiliar parts of the house, or holding objects she didn't remember touching. One morning, she awoke with muddy footprints on her sheets and dirt under her nails. The attic door creaked open on its own that night. Lydia, no longer in control, walked inside. Her reflection in the attic window didn't match her posture. It smiled, even as her face remained terrified. In the dust, a new message had been written. You let her in. That night, Lydia dreamed of her body floating outside of itself, watching someone or something else move her limbs. When she woke, her voice wasn't her own. It was deeper, older, and laughing. Desperate, Lydia invited a local medium, Eleanor, to help her cleanse the house. As soon as Eleanor stepped through the door, she staggered. It's not just haunted, she whispered. It's hungry. During the séance, the candles blew out one by one. Eleanor began convulsing, eyes rolling back, as a voice not hers spoke through her. The girl never left. She waits for Mother. A gust of wind flung open the attic door. Eleanor screamed and dropped to the floor. When she awoke, she refused to enter the attic, whispering, Something's pretending to be your mother. It wants your skin. Lydia found an old family Bible in the basement. Pressed between its pages were birth and death records. Names scratched out violently. Her mother's name was listed twice, once at birth, and again under departed, dated 2 years before she vanished. There were rituals annotated in the margins, binding rites, soul entrapment, mirror conjuring. Her grandmother hadn't just tried to banish something, she tried to trap it inside the house. Inside the attic. Inside them? Lydia realized the attic wasn't haunted by her mother, it was her mother, or rather something that wore her mother's face. The ritual hadn't killed the spirit, it had imprisoned it. And now it wanted to switch places. In the final moment of desperation, Lydia considered luring someone in. Just one soul, just one life, to be free. She stood at the mirror, staring at her reflection, which now wore her mother's stitched smile. We're already the same, it said. Lydia made her choice. She didn't offer another soul. Instead, she climbed into the attic and locked herself inside. She began the ritual in reverse, reading from her grandmother's diary with trembling hands. She'd trap herself, she thought. Become the new guardian of the curse. The attic grew darker. The air grew colder. And then nothing. The house on Mercer Hill was sold again 3 years later. A young family moved in. Their daughter giggled at night, staring up at the ceiling. The lady in the attic talks to me, she said. She says she used to live here. She says she's lonely. When Amelia moved to the edge of Ravenshade Hollow, she didn't expect the house to be so untouched by time. The creaking wood, the ivy-wrapped porch, and the thick fog that rolled in every dusk gave it a frozen-in-time charm. Locals had warned her not to buy it. They said no one lasted more than a week. On the first night, she heard scratching behind the walls. She assumed rats. But when she placed her ear against the paneling, a whisper came through the wood. Don't go downstairs. Shaking it off as sleep-deprived imagination, she climbed into bed. At exactly 3:33 a.m., her door creaked open, but no wind, or hinges groaning. Silence and something watching. The next morning, Amelia discovered a locked cellar door beneath the rug in the kitchen. The keyhole was rusted shut. Curiosity danced in her chest, but the whisper from the night before echoed too loudly in her memory. Later that day, she asked the village hardware shop owner about the property. The old man looked up, startled, when she mentioned the cellar. They built it over the original well, he said, voice shaking. You didn't open it, did you? That night she heard the whisper again, this time louder. Don't open the door, it remembers. She bolted from her bed and found the cellar lock turning on its own. Amelia couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw something peering through the mirror in her bedroom. At first, she thought it was a dream, until the reflection began to move, even when she stood still. Its eyes were hollow, but it mimicked her every gesture with a beat of delay. The next night, she draped a sheet over the mirror. But at 3:33 a.m., the sheet slid to the floor on its own, revealing the mirror fogged from the inside. In the center was a single handprint, small, childlike, but smudged with something dark and wet. She screamed and ran to the hallway, only to find muddy footprints leading from the mirror toward the locked cellar. Her phone had no signal, the reflection hadn't followed her, but she could still hear it whispering her name. Hoping to find answers, Amelia climbed into the attic the next morning. It smelled like rotting paper and mold, and was filled with boxes of old toys, newspaper clippings, and dusty dolls with empty sockets. One box was sealed with wax and bound with string, her name written across it. Inside, she found a series of drawings, crude, childlike depictions of a little girl holding hands with something tall and black, its body covered in sharp angles. Each drawing ended with the same image, the girl alone, standing at the cellar door, crying. Suddenly a heavy thud came from beneath her feet, directly above the cellar. Amelia dropped the drawings and bolted back down, but not before seeing a dark figure crawl across the far side of the attic, just out of reach of the light. The whispers turned to sobs. Every night now, at 3:33 a.m., the sound of a child crying echoed from beneath the house. Amelia placed her ear to the floorboards and froze. Back! The crying was coming closer. She grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar, determined to open the cellar. As she pried the boards free, a cold wind erupted from the cracks, smelling of wet stone and decay. She reached down with her light and saw stairs descending into darkness. But just before she could step inside, the crying stopped. Silence stretched across the room like a suffocating fog. Then, from the cellar, a voice whispered, "If you come down here, you won't come back up." Desperate, Amelia returned to the village to investigate the house's past. In the dusty back room of the library, she uncovered a journal belonging to a woman named Ruth Whitloth, original occupant of the house. The entries were frantic, often repeating the same sentence, "The child won't stop crying." Ruth wrote about adopting a strange child abandoned near the well. The child never spoke, never blinked, and cried at exactly 3:33 a.m. Ruth claimed the child could move without walking, appear in reflections, and knew when people were lying. The last entry was smeared with ink and blood. "I sealed it beneath. God forgive me. I sealed it in the dark, but it still remembers my name." Amelia dropped the book as the clock tower outside rang once. The library lights flickered. 3:33 was coming. That night, the clocks in the house all stopped at 3:33 a.m. simultaneously. Even the digital ones flickered and died. Amelia felt time freeze and unnatural stillness in the air, as if the house itself held its breath. Then the mirror cracked from the inside. Shadows flooded the walls, whispering in different voices. Some sounded like children, others like screams drowned beneath water. In the hallway, muddy footprints appeared again, this time leading upstairs. She followed them, trembling, until they stopped at her bedroom. Her bed was soaked. On the pillow, written in wet soil, were 3 words, "You're the next." The next day, a knock came at the door. A stranger old woman in a long coat with a crooked cane stood outside. "You're living in Ruth's house, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes never blinking. "You shouldn't be here." The woman introduced herself as Edith, a childhood neighbor. She confessed she had seen the child before it was locked away. "It's not human," she whispered. "It feeds on regret, on loneliness. That's why it chose you." Edith gave Amelia an old music box with strange symbols carved on the lid. "Play this if you ever hear it whisper your name again. But know this, if you open the cellar, it will never let you leave." That night the whispers came louder, chanting her name. Amelia clutched the music box and turned the key. A strange lullaby filled the air, soft at first, then rising into a low, discordant hum. The shadows shrieked and recoiled. The mirror shattered completely. The floor groaned, as though something massive was pressing against it from below. The shadows shrieked and recoiled. The mirror shattered completely. The floor groaned as though something massive was pressing against it from below. She ran to the kitchen only to find the cellar door swinging open. Inside was a staircase of rotting wood and black mold. At the bottom stood the figure of a child, featureless, arms outstretched. "I'm cold," it whispered. "Won't you come hold me?" Against every instinct, Amelia descended into the cellar. The air grew colder with every step. The walls wept water. Whispered prayers and cries echoed from the stone. At the bottom, the light flickered, revealing hundreds of tiny handprints on the walls. In the center was a well, sealed with rusted chains. As she approached, the crying started again, but this time it came from inside her own ears. She screamed and turned back to flee, but the stairs were gone. Behind her, the child opened its eyes. They were mirrors, and inside them, Amelia saw her own face trapped, alone, screaming. The morning after their escape from the attic, Emily noticed a strange door behind the vines in the overgrown garden. It was old, metal and chained shut, with runes carved into the frame. No one in the family remembered it being there. Curiosity drew her in, but dread pulled at her chest like an anchor. That night, the door creaked open on its own. A trail of red petals led from it to the back of the house. When Emily followed it, she found the word "return" scratched into the kitchen table. With the family's dinner laid out but untouched, cold and mouldy, Emily's father, once stoic and rational, began murmuring in his sleep again, calling out names no one knew. Maribel, Thorne, Father Ezra. She knew the door had to be connected to the house's buried past. But unlocking it meant facing a chapter the family had sealed away. Digging through old maps of the land, Emily discovered that there used to be a well behind the garden right where the mysterious door now stood. Legend spoke of villagers who threw offerings down the well to appease something ancient that lived in the dark. She pried open the door the next day. Behind it lay a stone staircase spiraling downward into complete blackness. Every step echoed with whispers, not words, but breaths, like the well itself was inhaling her presence. Halfway down, she found old wooden dolls lining the walls, each bearing a name of a family member, Lev or dead. The last one held a locket that once belonged to her mother. Her heart pounded. This place wasn't just watching them. As Emily descended further, she began to hear music, a child's lullaby sung in reverse. It was hauntingly familiar, the same song her mother used to hum when she thought no one was listening. But now, it sounded distorted, like something twisted it to fit its own tongue. When she reached the bottom, she found an underground chamber. At its center was a stone basin filled with dark water that never rippled. When she reached the bottom, she found an underground chamber. At its center was a stone basin filled with dark water that never rippled. Hanging above it was a mobile of small bones and teeth, spinning slowly despite the still air. Suddenly, the lullaby stopped. From the shadows behind the basin, a figure emerged. It looked like her mother, but her eyes were hollow, her skin grey, her mouth sewn shut. It reached for Emily with trembling hands, as if begging for help. Emily turned and ran. The encounter left Emily shaken. She couldn't sleep. Her dreams were filled with the sewn-mouthed figure whispering through bloody thread. The next day, every mirror in the house reflected not Emily, but the thing from the well chamber. When she tried to destroy one of the mirrors, the glass shattered into smoke. The smoke slithered along the floor and crept under doors, into walls. Every shadow in the house seemed to pulse with life, as if something was breathing inside them. Then, her little brother began sleepwalking again, muttering things in an old dialect Emily couldn't understand. She recorded him. When she played it back, it wasn't his voice but her own, begging for help. An old clock in the hallway that never worked suddenly began ticking. It chimed once every 13 minutes. Emily noticed that each chime coincided with something strange. Lights flickered, faucets ran red, a voice whispered her name. She opened the back of the clock and found a scroll hidden inside. It detailed a ritual, the 13th calling, meant to summon or banish an inherited darkness. But the scroll warned, if done incorrectly, the darkness wouldn't be banished, it would be born anew. As she studied the scroll, the clock struck 13 chimes at once. The house trembled, The walls cracked. Emily felt something inside her shift, as if part of her soul had been unlocked, and something ancient was now watching. From that day on, daylight brought no safety. The sunlight bent in strange directions through the windows. Shadows twisted unnaturally across the floor. Even candles flickered without wind, and sometimes screamed when extinguished. Emily tried lighting incense and using mirrors to reflect pure light, hoping to drive whatever it was back. But the light itself turned against her. She looked into a mirror and saw not herself, but the stitched-mouthed figure again, smiling. Her family began acting strangely, repeating phrases, blinking out of sync, moving without sound. Emily realized they were no longer fully themselves. Whatever possessed the light had begun possessing them. Desperate for answers, Emily returned to the old blueprints and found something curious: a room that didn't exist anymore. Buried beneath the original floor plan was a hidden chamber directly under the dining room. It was called the Room of Breaths. She tore through the floorboards and found a trapdoor sealed with wax and rope. The moment she opened it, a gasp echoed throughout the house, if the house had taken its first breath in years. The room below was filled with thousands of jars, each containing a single breath, labeled with dates and names. Some were hers, one had today's date. Someone or something was collecting life itself, and Emily was next. Her research led her to an abandoned church nearby. Inside was a decaying altar and a mural of a winged figure with no eyes and too many hands. Beneath the mural was carved, "To sacrifice voices to be heard forever." The priest's journal lay on the altar. His final entry spoke of a ritual to trap a soul within a bloodline, giving it eternal presence, but at the cost of silencing all others. Emily now knew her family was bound by this curse. Suddenly, the bells rang, even though the ropes were rotted away. Outside the windows, hundreds of eyeless figures gathered. They had no mouths, but their silence screamed louder than anything Emily had ever heard. Back at home, her family stood waiting. All were silent, all were smiling. They held out their hands, as if offering her peace, but Emily saw the truth in their empty eyes. They were vessels now, puppets of the darkness. Emily tried to speak, but no sound came. Her voice had been taken. The final part of the ritual was complete. She fell to her knees, clutching the scroll, and realized she had one choice left: to offer herself entirely or burn the house to break the cycle. With trembling hands, she set the scroll on fire. The house screamed. The walls cracked. Every jar of breath shattered, flooding the room with voices lost to time. And then silence fell like a curtain. In the ash and ruin of the house, only Emily stood. Her voice slowly returned, broken, raspy, but hers. The sun rose for the first time in weeks without bending or bleeding. The land was quiet again. She walked to the edge of the well, now dry and empty. A single breath echoed from its depths, her mother's, this time at peace. Emily dropped the locket into it, sealing the past behind her. But deep in the forest, where shadows sleep and whispers grow, one jar remained unbroken, labeled with the year 2033, a year that had not yet come, and on its lid a name: Emily's daughter. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to support the Rub Story channel. Thank you.